I make so many hand gestures when I speak. This is what people miss on the podcast. Right now,
You trying to scritch their ears or little elven baby ears?
I just have 2 little pointer fingers just kind of like wiggling back and forth because these are little elven ears, of course, obviously.
I love it.
Hey guys, welcome to Breakfast in Beauclair, a global Witcher podcast. My name is Alyssa from GoodMorhen, and I'll be your host as I and our international hanza accompany Geralt of Rivia and his destiny Cirilla of Cintra across the continent. Thank you so much to everyone who stopped by the London meetup and this year's Halloween party. We had so many great closet cosplays, and you can see everyone's costumes on the Breakfast in Beauclair Twitter and Instagram, and take a guess yourself as to who everyone came as. If you'd like to host a local Hanza meetup like the London one, reach out to the community at bit.ly/the Hanza Discord. In other news, last year I was a guest on an incredibly fun podcast called But Make It Scary, the show which turns classic rom-coms into horror films. Super appropriate for the Halloween season, right ahead of Halloween this Monday. Previously, I turned a Cinderella story with Hilary Duff into a Norse monster horror flick. This time, join me and host Sequoia as we make the classic film Princess Diaries 2 Royal Engagement scary. Find the show on your podcast service of choice at But Make It Scary or embedded on the appearance section of the Breakfast in Beauclair website, with all of my other guest spots from The Newest Olympian, The Story Tinker, On the Path, Meddling Adults, and No Bad Ideas. I still have one guest spot for this season, so I'll let you know in the next few episodes of Breakfast in Beauclair when that comes out, but be sure to check it out when it does. Thank you so much to our patrons for supporting the show, and our producer-level patrons, Louise of Covier, the owner of the Churlish Porpoise, Katie the Redhead from Toussaint, Jacob B., Ovo of Gullet, B. Haven of the Edge of the World, Charlotte from Vangerberg Glamorai, Red Kite, the Original Roach, Codringer's Cat, Libby, Jendi Mandilovich, Wolf, Corey from the US, John of Riblia, Tom from Australia, Jill Kate the Tabby Witch, Ollie from Sweden, James Carson III, Silo Sibe Sorcerer, A Toussaint Knight, Jeanette of Brokalon, Miriam of Temeria, Softy, and Mary the Moo. If you would like to learn more about becoming a patron of the show, head over to patreon.com/breakfastinbeauclair. As for this episode, Allison from the US and Beau from the US wrap our discussion of Netflix's The Witcher episode 207, Voleth Meir. Join us as we discuss Yennefer's realization of Ciri's potential and her change of heart, Vilgefortz's unnerving personality change, Fingilla's slow isolation and consequent outburst, using primordial magic for everyday productivity, a TED Talk on Deadly Nightshade, Stormchasers Nilfgaard, and how this episode in particular is an examination of hope. Visit the episode page on breakfastinbeauclair.com to find the educational video on Deadly Nightshade that Allison references in the discussion. It's been pretty quiet on the news front since Netflix's To Doom, so there's no tidings from Toussaint this week, but we'll hear from Lars soon as we head toward Blood Origin, which is officially less than 2 months away. Without further ado, let's get to our discussion of Netflix's The Witcher, episode 207, Voleth Meir, part 2. Hey everyone, welcome back from the break. When we left off, Geralt had broken Jaskier out of jail in order to search for Yennfer and Ciri. Meanwhile, the elven baby's arrival in Cintra pushes Fingilla to the sidelines and stirs the Brotherhood of Sorcerers in the north. You know, as we keep going, Yennfer instructs Ciri on how to use her chaos to get them to the other side of a river. So Ciri attempts to use magic to fix the bridge and like levitate it and put it back together again. And she starts like crying blood.
Oh, yeah.
And when she fails, she, lets out a scream and suddenly they're transported with the horses to the other side of the river. And again, Yennfer is realizing the magnitude of Ciri's potential.
Yeah, I just love how at least Ciri in this season and last season, like how she uses her power, she just screams. And I find that like funny in some senses because like episode 8, she just like screams and I'm like, oh my gosh.
It's like Ember Island players Toph in Avatar: The Last Airbender. Are you guys familiar? It's just this giant rock-like man just being like, I use echolocation.
Forgot
so
all about
good.
that.
I mean, imagine how much stuff I could get done if anytime I was frustrated, I screamed and then it was done. What a superpower.
Life would be so simple.
And she was able to transport, like, the horses over also. I'm like, whoa, that's impressive. Not just, like, Yennfer and Ciri, but also the horses who were just, like, eating grass in the background, not even, like, disturbed, or they didn't even know that something happened.
Yeah. I mean, those two particular horses seem very oblivious to everything that goes on around them.
Yeah, they saw their masters get disintegrated. They're just like, whatever.
Teleporting.
Yeah, it's very on brand. Oh man. I guess the one thing there's like a quote here from Yennefer that I quite like. The idea that you can either be too strong to fail or too weak to try. I think Yennefer is, especially in the books, she's like a woman of tough love. That quote particularly feels in line with that character and that mentality.
At least in the, like, show, Ciri's power is, like, developing quite fast. I remember in the book series, it was, like, Ciri was having the hardest time, like, moving, I don't know.
A bucket.
Yeah. Also, like, her bloody tears. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Jeez, that's unfortunate.
Terrifying.
It is interesting that they come out of all four corners rather than just one. I was confused by that, but, you know, hey, details. Throw them under the bridge.
That's actually a really good point. Ciri's got 4 tear ducts.
Yeah. Like, as you said, it's interesting that her powers are developing so much more quickly. Like, it feels like she's kind of speed running, like, Intro to Magic 101. I wonder if that's because the stakes are higher, or if it's obviously convenience of the plot and of the 8-episode structure, or if it's because, like, she's older. It does seem she went from, like, having completely uncontrollable powers to having semi-controlled powers in a very, very short period of time.
Yeah, it'll be a line I think the show has to tread carefully in that sense, because once you do something with a character's power level, you can't go back at that point without having to try and sort of create this plot line around it as to why they are depowered all of a sudden.
I mean, we do see that with Yennefer's storyline, to be fair.
True.
Like, she does spend her entire season depowered. By the end of this scene, Yennefer is starting to realize, as I said, Ciri's actual potential, and she's going to continue to mull over that for the rest of the episode. In the next scene, Triss and Tissaia discuss what Triss had witnessed at Kaer Morhen, but are interrupted by Vilgefortz, who demands information about the girl. Triss leaves, feeling betrayed by Tissaia. This scene goes from like 0 to 100. It starts off with Triss standing at a windowsill. She's glad to be home at Aretuza. She looks super relaxed. Tissaia comes up behind her, you know, her hair's back up and everything. They're reminiscing about their time in Aretuza and how gentle Triss has always been, even as a child. Things get, like, weird because Tissaia starts asking about Ciri, still kind of gently probing. And then Vilgefortz immediately, like, comes in, his robe, like, billowing behind him. And he's like, tell me about the girl, tell me everything. Of course, Triss, who believed that this was in confidence, is just heartbroken. And then the tenderness, I think, that we saw in Tissaia and Vilgefortz's first scene does a complete 180. He completely blows up at her. It's genuinely terrifying to watch. The same kind of power dynamic that we see with Cahir and Fringilla, where Fringilla just starts to feel very small and very powerless in comparison. We see that here with Tissaia and Vilgefortz as well, which has its own terror to it because Tissaia is a character that we've seen and viewed with a lot of respect throughout the last 2 seasons. So to see her reduced in Vilgefortz's presence, it's genuinely terrifying because we know what she's capable of and we know that she's a very, like, composed and stern woman. And then things get super gross and super toxic because after yelling at her, she goes to leave and he immediately love bombs her. He's just like, I love you. You're my partner. We need to do this together. I'm so sorry. She has tears in her eyes. And it's just, it gives me the heebie-jeebies.
Yeah, red flag, as we put in our notes.
I hate it. I hate it so much.
Yeah, poor Tissaia. She was, like, just trying to help out Triss, and it just, like, turned around on her, and, oh, geez, sad.
Because enough scenes go by, you go, oh, this guy he's pretty nice. He's pleasant to be around. And then he explodes and he has these outbursts and it reminds you, like, oh no, he's most definitely insane. Every scene that conveys that, I think, is wonderful. And Mahesh is just so amazing. That explosion, like you said, it's terrifying. And he's so commanding in this scene and so manipulative as well. He knows exactly how to push her buttons. And it's horrifying.
Man, I'm sure we'll get to see their relationship continue over the next season or two. Like, if this is any preview of what we're going to get, ugh, it's going to be rough. It's going to be so rough. In the next scene, Fringilla turns to her uncle Artorius for help, but he rebuffs her. TLDR of their argument, she's like, I need to impress the Emperor. And he's like, oh, but you're the enemy. And she's like, yes, but I'm family. And he's like, LOL, tough shit. That's basically the conversation that happens, which is heartbreaking for a number of reasons. One of the first being that, like, Artorius doesn't really seem to care about his niece, which is unfortunate in and of itself. We know he has aspirations within the Brotherhood. He has commitments to the Northern Kingdoms, and his niece doesn't take precedence over that. The second reason why I find this really heartbreaking is that Fringilla attempts to use the same argument that Francesca said to her. She's like, but we're family. Blood is all we have. And he really doesn't care. He goes even further to say that she should apologize in order for him to help her. She asks for aligning with Nilfgaard, of course. And he says no, for believing that you could have any impact there at all, my dear. There are those who are obsessed with finding power and those who know their place. You know which one you are, thank gods. You wouldn't have come back here if you didn't. If we follow Yennefer's timeline, Yennefer spent decades in Aedirn. Presumably Fringilla's been in Nilfgaard that whole time. So it's easily been somewhere between like 50 and 100 years that Fringilla has been, attempting to build Nilfgaard. We can see how she's being pushed away and isolated by everybody, by Francesca, by the generals, and the Nilfgaardian command, by her own uncle. We'll see what she does in that desperation and the isolation.
Yeah, I love when shows or books or anything, when they take a character that they've established as powerful and intimidating and put them in a very vulnerable spot. This kind of harkens back to the conversation that we were just having about Tissaia and Vilgefortz as well, because it's a similar dynamic here. You can see how harshly his words affect her. It's a beautiful kind of melancholic place to put a character. And I love it. It always adds so much depth to them. And I thought this scene in particular really highlighted that well. Especially, with family, that's always going to be an interesting relationship dynamic, especially when the stakes are as high as they are in the case of this show. And with Tissaia, it's a lover. Those kind of relationships, the push and pull of it, it's fascinating to watch on screen.
Absolutely. And I think it circles back around to the idea of like everyone having their own independent goals and their aspirations, and how much bigger the world feels for it. In the next scene, Dara expresses his change of heart to the owl in the sill. He no longer cares about Redania or Cintra. He wants to focus on keeping elven hope alive, and declares he will stop spying for Redania.
Yeah, I thought it was like a nice moment. He feels happy and content, actually, because in the first season, he kind of felt alone, and he was like the only elf, and he was with Ciri. It's really nice to see, but unfortunately, probably won't turn out well, but it's nice to see Dara happy and make decisions for himself.
Yeah.
When they recruited him to be a spy for Redania, that was not his choice. That was to get out of jail. And so now he's like, I need to make decisions for myself because I feel confident in myself.
Yeah, he's always just been a pawn.
Mm-hmm.
And it feels like for the entire time we've known Dara, he really hasn't had any agency or independence, because he was on the run with Ciri, hiding his identity. He was a Redanian spy for a hot second. And this is the first time he's really saying no, I don't want to do this. I guess unless you count when he killed the Doppler and he's like, LOL, bye Ciri. No, I don't want to do this.
See ya.
This is the second time he's asserting himself in the series. It feels like he gets one little slip each season now. We'll see if he uses a no card in season 3. But it's nice. I'm happy for him. He's thriving. He's doing great. I am nervous about where his character is going to go, because it is a character that I quite like.
Yeah, and characters that are original to the show, they bring a different energy to it, and there is that mystery. And book characters, you kind of generally know, even if it's done in a slightly different way. It's okay, I kind of know the way this is going, but show original characters, it could be whatever.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm curious to see what they do with him.
Yeah. I already laid out my entire theory about Dara in episode 203, What is Lost with Kyle and Laura. And even though I was horribly, horribly wrong this season, this is like me planting my stake in the ground again.
Second time's a charm.
I know. We'll see. I still think that Ciri and Dar will reunite long enough for Dar to die.
How do you think he'll go out?
Oh, as part of the Scoia'tael, like 100%. He's so going to join the Scoia'tael, and he's going to either come up against Ciri or something like that, and then he's going to die. I think it's still going to be very similar to Shaerwed in Chapter 4 of Blood of Elves, which we've spoken about in the podcast, so it's free reign here. That's my one prediction about Dar in general. I do think he's going to join the Scoia'tael, and he'll be around long enough to die in front of Ciri or something. I could be horribly wrong.
We'll check back on that in about a year.
See how that goes.
I know. I'm like, give it like a year, 2 years, 3 years.
Yeah.
I'm gonna not even know what episode to reference anymore. Remember that time I talked to Bo and Allison like 6 years ago? It paid off.
Oh, we'll remind you. We won't let you live this down.
On the subject of death and destruction for everybody, in the next scene, under the watchful wrath of Voleth Meir, Fringilla kills the Nilfgaardian generals one by one, leaving Cahir alive. I will admit, I still have never watched this scene.
Really?
Oh, I'm so squeamish. As soon as I caught a glimpse of a knife going into an eyeball, I was like, I'm not watching
That
this.
was hardcore.
I've listened to this
Oh,
scene.
is that any better?
Well, because you hear the little squelchy of the eyeballs and of the, it's not
It
great.
doesn't sound great either, no.
Yeah, but it's, I got the gist. So the generals are having some meal. It's so dark outside, it could be any time of day. They're kind of having a bit of a chit chat. The main general is still trying to convince Cahir, we should kill her. And if we don't kill her, the emperor will kill her. I'd be surprised if she still had her head on by tomorrow. Ha ha. And then they all immediately freeze. And then Fringilla has her monologuing villain moment. I had such contempt for my education at Aretusa, but they taught me of all things botany and the paralytic qualities of Nightshade. And then she kind of launches into her motivations for killing off all the generals. And then kind of kills them all one by one, as they're all paralyzed with the exception of the dog that's taking advantage of the situation to eat. But by the end of this, she gets to Cahir. Emir needs to hear of the treachery I just uncovered, and he needs the general that he trusts most to tell him I was justified. So when he arrives tomorrow, rave. I'm getting chills in my little brain just thinking about it.
Likewise,
It's very haunting and very well done. And the whole time in the background, you're kind of hearing this demonic laugh of Voleth Meir. Yes, feed your pain, feed your desperation. We'll continually come to this idea, I think, in the following scenes, that, people do crazy out of character things when they feel like they've been cornered. And I think with the isolation that we've seen for Fringilla specifically throughout this episode, yeah, this is a little over the top, but we understand why it's happening because she is so desperate.
Yeah, she does just an amazing job in this scene. And well, I when I was watching the episode, I watched that scene quite a few times. They did a really good job with that aspect. And at the end, when she says rave, I'm like, oh my gosh, we haven't seen this side of Fringilla. Like you said, it just chills, but the actress did an amazing job in that aspect.
This is the moment where she feels so cornered that she has to make the most extreme power move she can. I was like you, Allison. I rewound it the first time I watched it too, because it was just wow, that was so well done and just a chill-inducing scene. And I was sort of trying to take note of the sound design. I thought was phenomenal, which is criminally an underrated element of shows and movies and games, everything. And to see it just cut to this complete eerie silence, and then this just long stringing sour note of, I don't know what it is exactly, but it's awful.
Yeah.
And it's just this perfect building of tension. And then, yeah, like you said, Alyssa, the cackling of the deathless mother, and the whole, she's raving in this right now, right? She's just having the best night of her life watching this.
Yeah. And then we have squelchy eyeball.mp4.
Oh yeah.
Just the back.
Yeah, I'd love to be a part of the whole making of that scene.
Yeah.
It had to have been fascinating.
Yeah. Oh, and when Fringilla was stabbing the general's eyes. Like, I don't know if you guys remember from the game when Gaunter did, like, freezes time and he, like, sticks, like, a wooden spoon in someone's eye. I was like, oh my gosh, this is kind of a Easter egg potentially, but oof, both of those scenes from the game and show, it's like you cover your eye as you're watching that, or I guess in Alyssa's case, hearing that.
Yeah, I mean, it's super interesting because a lot of conversations have been had about how comparable the Deathless Mother feels to Gaunter O'Dim. So it is really interesting to see, like, the games may have impacted the show and that, like, there's a lot of exploration and play between these two pieces of media, which I think is super fun.
Absolutely. That's a great call. There is a lot of parallels between those two scenes. I think just in the atmosphere they create as well. Because in The Witcher 3, that scene with Gaunter, it's still burned into my mind. It's chilling. And exactly. I love that if it was intentional that they're sort of calling back to it, but either way, just if you want to freak your audience out, have a paralyzed person and just slowly stick a needle into someone's eye. It's awful.
So grim.
Definitely don't want to die that way. That's like on the list of like 100 ways that I do not want to die.
I don't need a blunt spoon to the brain. That's
a
totally
blunt spoon
fine.
would be even worse, wouldn't it? Wow.
No, that's hard. Ooh. I'd rather have a knife than a spoon. That's like something sharp. It just makes it better, but also like not much better. I mean, you're just getting stabbed in the eye regardless, but...
On that happy note, Allison, you also had like a couple of notes here on Nightshade. Do you want to chat about that as well?
Yeah, this is kind of my nerd within a nerd moment, I guess. So at least like Nightshade. So Nightshade is actually like a genus of flowering plants. So like I think the Latin name is like, if I pronounce it right, Solanum, something like that. And in this like genus, there's like 2,300 types of flowering plants, actually. So Nightshade is like very big and wide kind of class of plants. And it includes plants that we commonly eat. So like tomatoes, eggplants, potatoes, peppers, but it also includes some poisonous plants. So that's probably what they were trying to like get at in the show. I found like this really fun video that just does a really great job talking about like the one that they were probably referring to in the show called Deadly Nightshade, also called the like scientific name Atropa belladonna. And this plant actually like produces these like really dark, shiny, like sweet fruit and are extremely poisonous. Like if you eat a few, you can like die. And when I was doing research, I thought this was like the coolest thing. It was named after like one of the fates, which I didn't know what the fates were which were like the trio goddess that kind of do the weaving of like say individuals' lives to like determine their destiny. And one of the fates is called Atropos. So she's the one that actually cuts the thread. So if you think about like cutting the thread of life, I thought that was like brilliant, honestly. I was like, oh my gosh, that's so cool. Like people actually did a good job naming the like scientific plants. So sometimes when they're naming scientific plants or like just random science names, it's like, that makes no sense at all. Where did you come up with this? But this is one instance where they did a good job. They did their research.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like we got a hint of that even in like Blood of Elves chapter 5 when Geralt goes to name like the Zeagle in the mud or whatever.
Oh yeah. At least for this like agent, so it's called like belladonna, which it's been used historically, you know, as potentially like kill someone, and other ones, which is like really fascinating, which I remember learning about in like a class in my undergrad, was like women used it like a diluted version of like the berry, and they would drop them in their eye, and it would actually like make their pupils like really big. And so
why?
Because apparently that was what was attractive back then, having just like
no.
I know. I'm so glad we don't have that fashion today.
Can you imagine?
Oh, no. Yeah, I mean, between that and like licking lead bars, like, I think we're doing a little better.
Thank God. So that's kind of where it has come. But when I was trying to look at least the effects of belladonna, if you ingest enough and like in high enough concentrations, it has this like active ingredient called tropane alkaloids, and this can cause like various side effects. So like blurry vision, dried mouth, and on the more extreme side, like fast heart rate, disorientation, delirium, and then eventually respiratory depression, which can lead to death. So that's how like they probably use it to kill people. So that was really interesting. And then fun fact, here's my pharmacy background. Like they're actually like still use these components in medical drugs today. So there's like atropine, which I don't know if they use it like entirely today, but it's like eye drops locally to the eye. So it only like affects the eye, thankfully, causes a pupil dilate. So then ophthalmologists can like see what's actually in the back of the eye. And then there's these scopolamine. It's called scopolamine, which is, I don't know if you guys have heard them. They're like these little patches you can put behind your ear to help with nausea and vomiting.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so that's another kind of nightshade fun fact. But overall, nightshade doesn't cause paralysis, but it can kill you. So like this is something that I was like critiquing upon in the show, but I'm like, at least they mentioned something kind of fun. So
that's so interesting.
Yeah, sorry, long rant. This is my other thing when I get into like little like deep dives into all these scientific things. It's hard to get out.
Oh no need to apologize. I feel like that's what Breakfast in Beauclair is. It's just a lot of people nerding out about a lot of different facets of the same exact thing.
Exactly.
Which is what makes it fun.
No, I found that completely fascinating. And that video that Allison recommended was called Deadly Nightshade Has the Deadliest Berries on Earth. And it's by a channel called Animalogic. So if any of you out there are interested in checking that out, it is a fascinating video. And the part that made me laugh was the fact that if bees can go up to these berries and take them in, and then when they produce honey, the honey is ever so slightly toxic. Like the remnants of this berry are carried to the bee, and I just love that. Like everything about this plant is fascinating to me, and I never would have known that without you, Allison. So thank you.
Yeah, it's so fun, like learning about just like all of these things, especially with pharmacology. Like a bunch of the medications that are kind of known today are originated from like plants, animals. It's really fun to like learn about, but they are like coming up with new different drugs from like that don't originate from plants and animals. But this is like one instance where they used a plant as like for therapeutic purposes in patients. So
that's so interesting. Well, yeah, thank you so much for pulling that and for sharing it. And thank you so much for dropping the link because I'll pop it into the show notes. So if you listeners at home, go to breakfastinbeauclair.com/listen/episode whatever this episode number is. You'll be able to find the link to Allison's video there as well. In the next scene, Dijkstra strategizes Redania's next move with Vizimir. Again, Vizimir and Dijkstra, super fun together as, high chaos as Vizimir is. Dijkstra tells him, like, we lost a spy, whatever. I already got the scoop on everything that's going on the continent, so we Gucci. He confirms with Vizimir that, like, their plan to take Cintra is still a possibility. So let's do that. And that's basically, like, what happens in this scene.
Yeah, and then we have the owl just chilling there. And, like, I noticed when Vizimir was like talking to Dijkstra, and Vizimir's like, oh yeah, when you went to Aretuza. I don't know if it was just me, but like the owl like turned its head, and I was wondering if the owl's like, oh my gosh, you went to Aretuza? I did not know about this. So
I'm sure that was intentional.
Vizimir is just a little shit, isn't he?
A worm.
Number 5.
He's just like the quintessential awful king that just probably inherited the throne, and Dijkstra is just loving every bit of it. Like that is the perfect toy to manipulate, right? Because he has no idea. And this scene kind of demonstrates like Vizimir has no idea what's going on in the political landscape. He doesn't care because he has Dijkstra, and Dijkstra is just sitting back like, yep, I'll take care of it all.
But it's not like he's unaware that that's their dynamic, though, because I think Vizimir even says at some point, like, yeah, you're going to make bets, but you're going to make bets with my money. So he knows exactly he knows the gist of what Dijkstra is up to, and he knows that he's bankrolling everything and that this is all in the glory of Redania, whatever. But I think you're right. He just seems very flippant about everything, and it's just everything is happening to and around him, it feels like.
But you are right. He does recognize that this is a two-way street. in regards to this relationship. Yeah, Vizimir has something to offer that Dijkstra very much needs.
Yeah, this is definitely not the last we'll see of them either. Especially as like things start to ramp up on the continent in general in regards to the politics and the outbreaking war. As we continue, Jaskier and Geralt discuss the Witcher's relationship with Ciri and Yennefer. So this is like a very small interlude before we kind of get to the chaos of the close of this episode. Geralt is, of course, on horseback. Jaskier is walking as per usual. Jaskier is kind of drilling into Geralt about, like, why does this matter so much? Who is this girl? What is Yennefer? What's going on with her? The two things that stuck out to me in this scene was Geralt saying, "I thought ignoring Ciri's existence would make everything better. I was wrong." So we see that not only has she acknowledged his presence in her life, but he does the same. Jaskier continues the conversation about Yennefer, and Geralt is very certain that like Yennefer has betrayed him and that everything has gone to pieces. But Jaskier wants to bring the humanity back. He spent time with her in Oxenfurt. He's intimately familiar with the situation that she's been in for, the last few months. And he says, what if she's changed too? People do stupid things when they think they're trapped in a corner, Geralt, which is, I think, one of the big themes that we'll see throughout this episode and the following.
Yeah, that was a really great quote that you put in there, and I really resonated with that, especially with like Jaskier saying like people do stupid things when they have like no other option, and you see that with like Fingilla, you see that with Yennefer in this case where he's referring to. So, and it's very applicable to life in just like general. So words of wisdom, Jaskier, hats off to you.
Yeah, and I think even like just in his own experience, like Geralt's leaving Jaskier at the top of a mountain is probably what he's referring to too. I think is their conversation has like multiple layers. And I think it's like him being, semi-compassionate toward Geralt and Geralt's frustration at the end of episode 106.
Yeah, I could listen to Geralt and Jaskier have a philosophical debate all night long. Like I just want a scene with them around a campfire just talking about this kind of stuff, because I feel like
drop the ASMR tape.
Oh man.
Crackly campfire bug track number 6. We're into it. Binaural whispers on either side.
I love it.
Oh, I'd be the first in line for that. I really would.
Netflix, make it happen.
Yeah.
Netflix, maybe.
But like, Bo, you were like talking about how like, yeah, it would be great to see like a conversation, but I know like comparing to like book Jaskier and Geralt, they have like really deep long talks, and then like in the show, it's like Geralt just mainly like says a few words and grunts here and there. It's a very different like dynamic, and if people have read the books, it's like, okay, you really know what their history is, and it's like, but in the series, yeah, Geralt, we all know who he is, just very quiet, speaks very few words. And of course, like Jaskier's like, whoa, stop talking. I thought that was hilarious.
Yeah, it does make me wonder if the character that they've built up for Geralt in the show has sort of become pretty universally loved by most people, and it's become a meme at this point, the hmms and the grunts and the fucks and all that. And it does make me wonder if at this point it would be kind of weird for Geralt to start having a long philosophical debate with someone, right? It's like, it would be kind of a surprise, I think, for his character at this point. He'd be like, oh, he's capable of that. Like there's there's clearly a thinking brain in that head of his. But I love anytime it's just like little nuggets that he drops out there that he's very self-aware, but he doesn't like to let that be known. Yeah.
It's really interesting, obviously, like having an actor that's so invested in the perception of his character and in building the character within the world. So I'm interested to see like where Henry Cavill and the team are going to continue to take Geralt and how much he's going to grow. Because it's so interesting in the books. Like he does grow, but I don't know, like it does feel like he grows, but in like a very lateral way. Whereas I feel like Ciri, it's her coming of age story really. So she grows in a much more dynamic way. Whereas Geralt, it's kind of like He's isolated, and then he finds friends. But I feel like a lot of his core personality doesn't necessarily change. So it's very interesting, and I'm curious to see, without pages of his internal monologue, how they're going to be able to grow his character on screen.
Absolutely, a character like Geralt is a difficult one to convey in a show like this, because he is so internal and so much is going on inside of his head that he can come off as like, wow, okay, then that's all you have to say, huh? Okay.
Yeah.
Off with you then, just like Askier says, like, fine, okay. So yeah, in the books, it seems like a subtle character arc.
Yeah.
For him, whereas Ciri is sort of the main focal point, and she has the more obvious character growth in the coming of age story. So yeah, it feels like they're tweaking that a little bit, but I'm interested to see it. It's kind of in an interesting direction. I'm excited to see Geralt. Always excited to see more Geralt.
And at this point, we circle back around to Ciri and Yennfer. From a brief touch, Ciri learns of Yennefer's betrayal. The pair is attacked by Nilfgaardian soldiers, but are saved by Geralt, Yarpen, and his crew. To be honest, I don't really know how this scene works or is justified in terms of like the magic that happens and the supernatural things that happen in it. But at this point, Ciri and Yennfer are now close enough to Cintra that they can, clearly see its skyline. They can see the crevice and the monolith that was there. And the the cavern that Istrid and Geralt found themselves in a few episodes previously. But as they're kind of walking toward this, they're getting closer to the door that the Deathless Mother asked Yennfer to bring Ciri to. And Yennfer at this point has a change of heart. She's like, wait, no, we can't go there. She reveals that Geralt isn't actually there, or is unlikely to be there. At some point, Ciri and Yennfer touch, and then there's this whole kind of like wub, and like the edges of the screen go purple, and suddenly they're like reading each other's minds. And the dialogue from this scene is pulled almost directly from the books, from a dream sequence that I'm fairly certain we've talked about in the podcast before, in which Ciri is in her dreams and she sees Yennfer, and Ciri tells Yennfer, like, we can't open that door, you know that. And Yennefer's like, it's too late for me, but it's not too late for you, turn back. In the books, that feels so much more abstract and elusive. Like it does feel like it refers to magic. It feels like it refers to a number of possibilities within Ciri's world and her potential. But here it feels very specific, which I find to be an interesting adaptation and use for the monologue. Because suddenly the door is a literal door. It's the door that the Deathless Mother wants to open, the door to like 1,000 worlds, whatever. It was unexpected. I'm always delighted and surprised whenever they pull dialogue directly from the books. But this was an application that like I couldn't have predicted, I think.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's interesting when they can take a paragraph from the books and, like you said, sort of twist it and keep the same words, but it has a completely different meaning now. And sometimes that's lost in adaptations, and sometimes it's captured pretty well. And I think this whole scene when Ciri touches Yennfer and they enter into the wub, it reminded me of like I don't know if you guys are familiar, but like an old Oblivion Elder Scrolls conversation where the camera would just zoom super close into the front of their face, and they would have this conversation, and this sort of back and forth between Ciri and Yennfer was kind of making me laugh. But and interesting. I'd be curious to know if that was completely coincidental on Ciri's part, or if she had an inkling or a drawing to reach out and actually grasp Yennefer's arm, if she felt compelled by the magic, or if that was just something she had no idea she could do in the first place.
Yeah, telepathy is something that they're capable of in Blood of Elves Chapter 7. And that, Ciri like touches her temples like
an 80s action movie.
Like Professor X.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And she's just like, my mistress is calling me, Yara. Bye.
BRB.
And she just kind of like runs away. Again, like I don't know. Like it's obviously a skill that they have in the books that we, again, haven't explored because Ciri's speedrunning Chaos 101. Yeah, it's curious. Like, I think it's one of those things where, like, you can't tell who's initiating it. Like, if Ciri did by touching her, or if it's the fact that both of them are, like, inherently have chaos, and then they, like, touch, and then it's, like, a minor explosion. Yeah, it's completely inexplicable in the context of the plot.
But they just roll with it. They're like, oh, sweet. I guess we're we're in a phone call now. Let's resolve our issues.
What's a phone call? This is the worst Zoom meeting ever.
Very advanced form of magic. Yeah.
I remember when Yennfer and Ciri were like actually talking, not like, with their minds. Yennfer was talking to Ciri about like magic and like how she should be like so grateful for it. And she almost goes off about like how it's a love like hate relationship with her and magic, because she's like, magic is like a spiked arrow, but it's also like bliss at the same time. And then Yennfer also goes on and says like, it's all you'll ever need. It's everything. So I thought that was like very interesting, especially like Yennfer, how now that she doesn't have like magic currently or her chaos, like she understands like how much she misses it. But also like I thought it was interesting how she's like, this is the only thing you will ever need in your life. And I'm like, ooh, is magic always the like one thing you need in your life? So I was like,
Given where they are in their journeys, how different their perception is. Yennfer used magic to like pull her out of poverty, pull her out of like a literal pigsty and into like the upper echelons of society. And Ciri kind of puts this very succinctly, and she tells Yennfer, you controlled the chaos, but it controls me. The magic that she carries, this burden that she carries, has been nothing but destruction for 2 whole seasons. Given how desperate Yennfer is, and how powerful she feels with magic, it feels like she just can't understand why Ciri wouldn't want it.
The shifting perspective Yennfer has on Ciri as well, and the use of her chaos magic, and I guess at this point in time, the jealousy Yennfer has of Ciri, seeing her do these amazing things with practically no training, utilizing that chaos. You can see, I think, behind Yennefer's eyes a little bit of that longing. And like, God damn you. Why can you do this and I can't right now? Like, this isn't fair.
Yeah.
Probably bringing back a lot of interesting internal conflicts to her time spent at Aretuza as well, watching others complete magical tasks and feats that she physically couldn't anymore.
Yeah. And I think that contention, as we'll dig into toward the end of the season as well, between Yennefer's jealousy, whether or not it's intentional and whether or not it's subconscious, versus Ciri's fear and Ciri's potential, and Ciri's mistrust by the end of the season. It's gonna be really interesting to explore their relationship in season 3, because of course from the books and the games we know that they become like a family unit with Geralt. How are we going to mend that bond and how are we going to grow it is like a really big question that we're going to have going into the next season.
Yeah, some pretty deep wounds were cut in this episode in particular and throughout this season, I think. So the characters will absolutely need time to heal and regrow together, but they might come back twice as strong because they've been through this.
I don't know. We'll see.
We'll see.
I know. I mean, by the end of the scene, Ciri realizes that Yennfer was about to betray her. She learns about the Deathless Mother and all that stuff just from like a little boop.
let me wub you.
Oh, wub.
Just a little wub boop. And then she causes this like earthquake in Cintra. All of the Nilfgaardian soldiers are on edge. They, gallop out to the source of the earthquake, which always seems like the logical thing to do. Yeah, I know. Like, go chase the natural disaster.
It's only going to end well.
Yeah.
Stormchasers.
Oh my God. Nilfgaard edition. They go to chase Yennfer and Ciri. They attack them. And, of course, that's immediately when Geralt, Jaskier, Yarpen, and his crew conveniently come in and take care of the situation. This doesn't look great for anybody involved. Geralt is equally as mistrustful of Yennfer as Ciri is. Geralt sends Ciri away with Jaskier and Yarpen to go back to Kaer Morhen, and Geralt, who has his bloodied sword at Yennefer's throat, demands that she recite the incantation. She feels very broken. She was about to do this thing she was so desperate to do because of Geralt and Ciri's relationship, because she had a change of heart. She doesn't go through with it. But Geralt still forces her to say this incantation, and he still doesn't believe her. So, she says, "Behold the mother of forests, the deathless mother nesting in dreams. Turn your back to the forest, hut, hut. Turn your front to me, hut, hut." And then they disappear.
Yeah, I also thought it was, like, interesting where Geralt's like, "Oh, yeah, I have a monster to kill," and it's like, "Oh, does he mean Yennfer?" But then it's like, "Oh, no, they mean Voleth Meir."
Yeah.
So I thought it could have gone both ways.
That's how I took that scene as well.
I mean, like, never say never, right?
Yeah. I took that context in a very similar way as well. Like, oh, wow, he means Yennfer in this situation. But then, yes, it's resolved. Henry Cavill is wonderful in this scene.
Mm-hmm.
This is a hard one to act out, I would imagine, because there's a lot of conflicting emotions inside of him at this very moment. I mean, wow, talk about a hard decision to raise that sword to her throat. But ultimately, he doesn't care. That's what he's going to do. She put Ciri's life in danger, and he's going to do anything in his power to stop that from happening. And the intensity in his eyes when he claims Ciri as mine, not yours, Yennfer. She's mine. Wow. I rewound that scene several times.
Yeah. It's a lot of conviction, and I think a lot of affirmation, because they've both been dancing around this idea, and it's like they've both been feeling it. But this episode, between Ciri's admission to Yennfer, Geralt's admission to Jaskier, they both said that privately, but like never within like earshot. It feels like he is claiming her as his daughter with conviction. It's like, oops, we're a family now.
Let's do a road trip.
Spadios.
Let's go to Disneyland.
We finally come to the close of the episode. In Cintra, an assassin kills the newborn elven baby. Voleth Meir feeds on Francesca's pain, filling the demon with enough power to leave the hut and find a new home in Ciri. As with a lot of things in this episode, incredibly heartbreaking. We, the collective we, have doted on this beautiful elven baby with its little squeaky little ears. It is killed in the middle of the night. Because we spent all this time with Francesca, Filavandrel, Dara, and the elves, we know how much this really means to them. As Stregobor put it, like, really is a symbol and a beacon of an elven future, really, in hopes of like an elven renaissance and of a resurgence of their power. So to, one, lose a child, and two, lose this beacon of hope for the entire society is really heartbreaking. Voleth Meir, of course, kind of like noshing on all that pain before like disappearing into the sky.
Embers.
She gets Thanos snapped.
Yeah, it's like we all just kind of like turn to stardust, and then like Ciri accidentally like huffs her remains, and then and then we're here at episode 8. But what did you guys think of like this entire closing sequence?
Oh my gosh. Well, it was really powerful. The elven baby was murdered pretty much, which is obviously heartbreaking, like no matter the situation. And then, Voleth Meir cackling away, turning into embers and floating away is just like feeding off of that. So to end the episode like this, it's like, oh my gosh, what's going to happen in the next episode?
Yeah, it's a perfect place to leave the penultimate episode. I think like the world is just in chaos, and you don't know what the repercussions of this are going to be exactly. And Tom and Misha. Wow. How do you even prepare for a scene like this going into it? It's got to be it probably just wrecks you for the whole rest of the day. But they are wonderful in this scene, and it's just like you said, it's heartbreaking to watch.
Yeah,
I love like you said, this baby means so much to their culture, and to see it taken away is they are, let's just say, not going to be very happy about that.
No, and like it sets up the final episode very nicely. I think regardless of your feelings about the plot line, and I know that across the board and across all of the episodes of Breakfast in Beauclair season 4, as we've been discussing season 2 of the Netflix series, I've had conflicts about like the Voleth Meir storyline in general. But I do think that all the little chess pieces in this specific episode do set up episode 8 as best as they can. And I will agree with you, Bo. Like, I think it is like a good penultimate episode. As we close out the episode, like, I'd love to hear some of your final thoughts. I know for me, this episode just felt like a exploration of hope, I think, and an exploration of desperation, which I think is really interesting to see the dynamic there. And I think those things like can't really exist without the other, of course, as Nenica proposed like in the beginning of this episode. Because a lot of these characters wouldn't have gone to the lengths that they did if they didn't hold out hope for so long. We see that in Ciri having hope that she's going to find Geralt and Cintra, Fringilla and thinking that she'll find an ally, any ally, throughout the course of the episode, but goes through, you know, like a handful and doesn't find any support anywhere. But she still carries that hope until it turns to isolation. Same thing for Geralt. He believes that he's going to find Yennfer and Ciri. And Francesca, Filavandrel, Dara, all of the elves believe that this child is the beginning of a new era for them. And I think that they're one of the strongest carriers of hope throughout the episode until, of course, the end. And Yennfer, her hope and her desperation drives her toward bringing Ciri to Cintra until she has that change of heart. So I feel like this episode really explores the lengths to which people will go and the desperation that they find themselves in and what drives them to continue. So I found it to be a really interesting episode and a really interesting character study.
Absolutely. It was one of my favorites as well. I'm always a fan of penultimate episodes. I feel like that was always the case in Game of Thrones.
R.I.P.
Yeah, I'm gonna say that. I'm gonna say the forbidden words here. Yeah, fire and blood. Watch out. But yeah, I feel like in that series, penultimate episodes were always like the oh shit episodes. You can kind of finale episodes, you sort of know what to expect. It's usually going to be a big battle, and it's exciting and it's fun, but it's the pulpy kind of fun. And I feel like penultimate episodes typically set up the mystery and the intrigue, and they leave you in this sort of despair sometimes. And I think the theme of hope is absolutely correct, and what your characters do when that hope is taken away. Because that's a muddy kind of emotion. You know, there's a lot of expectations and a lot of things people are hoping to get out of it. And so if those aren't met, they will do some interesting things. I think like losing hope is a big theme of this season. Geralt losing hope in Yennfer. I think ultimately at the end of this episode in particular, he's sort of at that point where I don't know if he's completely trusting her at this point. And yeah, it was several key scenes in particular made it one of my favorites of the season.
Yeah, agreed. About the theme of hope, that really kind of summarizes a lot of the characters' objectives, like you were saying, Alyssa. And yeah, hope, that's the biggest thing. And there was a lot to tackle in this episode in terms of content, but overall, it was really great to kind of have a really deep discussion about what their intentions were, as well as kind of what they were hoping to happen in the end. So again, setting up for the last episode, episode 8. So
it's going down for real.
Oh, man. What an episode, and what an episode it is. That is it for our show today. Allison, Bo, thank you so much for joining me for this episode, and thank you to our Hanza for listening. Next episode, join us as we discuss The Witcher, Season 2, Episode 8, Family. Thanks for joining us at the Breakfast Table. For show notes, transcripts of each episode, and a complete list of our social platforms and listening services, head over to breakfastandbeauclair.com. Breakfast and Beauclair is created by Alyssa from GoodMorhen and it's hosted by Alyssa with the Tinies from Toussaint Media segment by Alyssa from Witcherflix. The show is edited by Alyssa with music by Filter Media. Breakfast and Beauclair is produced by Alyssa in New York City with Louise of Covier, the owner of the Trollish Porpoise, Katie the Redhead of Toussaint, Jacob B, Ava of Gullet, B, Haven of the Edge of the World, Charlotte from Meyerberg, Glamorai, Red Kite, the Original Roach, Cover's Cat, Libby, Jenny Neelovich, Wolf, Corey from the US, John Verblia, Tom from Australia, Jill Kate the Tabby Witch, Ollie from Sweden, James Carson III, Salas Ibe Sorcerer, Toussaint Night, Jenna Brooklyn, Miriam of Tamaria, Softy, and Mary the Moo. Special thanks to Allison and Bo for joining us for this episode, and our international Hanza for their support.